Sometimes the most dangerous place to stand is the one that feels the safest. You don't notice it at first. Comfort doesn't come with a warning label. It doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like warm light, familiar rhythms, the quiet hum of predictability. You wake up and everything is just as it was yesterday. And maybe that feels like peace. Maybe you even call it stability. But slowly, quietly, it becomes something else. A room with no windows. A life with no wind. The truth is, we don't stay in our comfort zones because they're good for us. We stay because they're easy to explain. We call fear timing. We call hesitation wisdom. We say not yet when what we really mean is never. Have you ever told yourself you're just being patient when deep down you know you're hiding? Comfort is clever like that. It dresses up our excuses in noble clothing. It whispers, "You don't need to change. You're fine here." And maybe you are fine, but since when did fine become enough? What if your potential isn't waiting out there somewhere, but buried underneath all the reasons you've used to stay small? What if the version of you you've been protecting is the very thing holding you back? We decorate our cages with distractions, with routines, with little victories that keep us from asking harder questions. And we tell ourselves stories about why we can't, not now, not here, not yet. But have you ever asked what all those stories are costing you? See, the comfort zone doesn't just steal your ambition. It steals your aliveness. It dulls the edges of your desire, mutes the voice of your curiosity, and slowly erodes the wild hunger that once told you, there's more for you than this. Growth doesn't happen in ease. It happens in tension, in the stretch, in the step you're scared to take. You don't have to leap, but you do have to move. Sometimes the smallest step away from comfort is the loudest yes to your life. No, it won't feel safe, and it won't feel certain, but certainty is not the path to greatness. Curiosity is, courage is, the willingness to say, maybe I don't have all the answers, but I refuse to stay asleep in a life that no longer fits. You were not made to decorate a cage. You were made to outgrow it, one honest choice at a time. So I'll ask you, not with pressure, but with presence. What have you been calling comfort that's really just fear in disguise? What would happen if you stopped explaining your limits and started exploring your possibilities? Maybe you're not stuck. Maybe you're just rehearsing the wrong thought. And maybe, just maybe, today is the day you stop choosing easy and start choosing real. Because the life you long for is not waiting behind locked doors. It's waiting behind the ones you've been too afraid to open. There's a kind of comfort that doesn't nourish, it numbs. It doesn't arrive with chains or alarms. It shows up quietly, like a warm blanket on a cold day. It invites you to sit down, rest a while, stay a little longer, and why not? You've earned it. You've been through enough. You deserve a little peace, a little predictability, a little ease. But here's the thing no one tells you about that kind of comfort. If you stay in it too long, it starts to turn into something else. It becomes a place where your potential quietly goes to sleep, a place where dreams are shelved for later, where the hard questions are silenced by easier distractions. And before you realize it, that warm blanket becomes a net, a trap, a silent padded cell you decorated yourself with your routines, your reasons, your rationalization. It feels like home, but it slowly starts to feel like regret. Have you ever looked back on a time in your life and thought, I knew I should have moved, but I stayed? We often mistake stillness for peace, but not all quiet is calming. Some quiet is just the absence of movement, and in that stillness, time continues, opportunities pass, and slowly the walls close in. You see, comfort is not the enemy, it has a place. We all need seasons of rest, of reflection, of safety. But when comfort becomes the default, when it becomes the place you live, instead of the place you recover, it turns into a cage. The most dangerous prisons are the ones that don't feel like prisons. You don't notice the bars because they're made of soft things. This is just who I am. It's not the right time. What if I fail? I've already missed my chance. But these aren't facts. They're fear wearing the mask of logic. So many people live small not because they lack talent, but because they've built a life that is comfortable enough to distract them from their discomfort with themselves. They wake up, go through the motions, and convince themselves that good enough is good enough. But a quiet voice remains, the voice that says, "There's more, there was always more," and that voice never really goes away. It shows up in the stillness between tasks, in the strange ache you feel after another day that looked like yesterday, in the moment just before sleep, when all the noise fades, and only the truth remains. Comfort can't hide you from that voice forever. It can only delay it. The question is not whether you'll hear it, but whether you'll listen. You may not be able to leave the cage all at once, but you can start by noticing what part of your life feels more like safety than aliveness. You can start by telling the truth about what you've outgrown, and you can start by letting discomfort guide you, not punish you. Discomfort is not danger, it's a signal. It tells you where your growth is, where your courage lives, where the path to your truest self begins. Ask yourself, where have I traded possibility for predictability? What parts of my life are so familiar, they've become invisible? What dream have I silenced, just to keep the peace? Because here's the hard truth, one we all have to face, eventually. The longer you stay in the comfort zone, the harder it is to remember who you were before you settled. And yet, it's never too late to remember, to wake up, to stretch, to test the door of the cage and realize it was never locked. The bars were built by fear, the lock was held by doubt, but the key has always been in your hands. All it takes is one honest question, one uncomfortable step, one decision to stop decorating the cage and start designing your freedom. You were not born to stay safe. You were born to grow. We don't often call them excuses. We give them prettier names, reasons, realities, responsibilities. But deep down, we know when we're hiding behind something. Excuses are clever. They don't shout. They don't look like lies. They sound rational, reasonable, even responsible. They say things like, "I'll start when I have more time. This isn't the right season for me. I'm not ready yet. Maybe after I fix this one thing." They seem like truths, but they're not. They're stories. Stories we tell ourselves so we can stay where we are, even when that place is too small for who we're becoming. The mind, when afraid, becomes a master storyteller. It doesn't want you to grow, not because it wants to hurt you, but because it wants to protect you. Growth feels dangerous. It demands change, exposure, vulnerability, and the mind says, "Stay, it's safer here." But the soul wants more. It whispers under all the noise. You were made to become something greater than your comfort allows. And that's where the quiet battle begins, between the part of you that wants to stretch and the part of you that wants to stay hidden. Growth doesn't come dressed in confidence. It rarely arrives with certainty. It begins when you run out of explanations for why you haven't, and finally say, "Maybe it's time I do." Think about this. What have you been postponing? Not because you can't, but because your excuses have been more comfortable than your courage. Excuses buy you time, but they steal your momentum. They offer comfort, but they cost you your calling. They keep the walls clean, but they keep the windows shut. We make excuses for many reasons. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of leaving something behind. But what about the fear of waking up one day and realizing you never tried? That kind of regret is quiet, but heavy. It settles into the bones. It doesn't scream, it sighs. Growth doesn't wait for perfection. It waits for honesty. The moment you tell yourself the truth, "I'm afraid, I'm uncertain, I've been hiding," is the moment you create a crack in the wall. And through that crack, the light begins to come in. It doesn't take massive leaps. It takes small truths, spoken clearly. Growth begins when you say, "I don't need more time. I need more courage. I don't need to be ready. I need to be real. I don't need permission. I need to stop asking." That's the beginning. You don't need to conquer your entire life overnight. You just need to stop giving yourself permission to stay stuck. Because every excuse, no matter how sophisticated, eventually leads to the same place, nowhere. And every step beyond an excuse, even a trembling one, leads somewhere you've never been. Ask yourself, what's one excuse I've been living behind? What's one truth I've been avoiding because it makes me uncomfortable? What might become possible if I stopped explaining and started experimenting? Growth is not a reward for being perfect. It's the result of being honest, consistently, quietly, bravely. It's the act of saying, I'm done pretending. This excuse is the end of my story, because it's not. Your story doesn't begin with ease. It begins with the end of your old explanations, the end of what you can't do, the end of why now is not the time, the end of who you think you have to be before you begin. That's where growth lives, not in the perfect moment, but in the moment you stop waiting for it. We think we're avoiding the task, the hard conversation, the risk, the decision, the fear. But what we're really avoiding is growth. And what we avoid doesn't just disappear, it waits. It grows roots. It becomes part of the architecture of our life. And over time, that thing you've been sidestepping quietly turns into a wall, not one you can see from a distance, but one you feel every time you try to step forward and wonder why it's so hard. Avoidance is not neutral, it's cumulative. Every time you say, I'll deal with it later, every time you distract yourself from what's uncomfortable, you're not just buying time, you're building limits. We think we're escaping the hard thing, but we're actually trading tomorrow's freedom for today's comfort. And the bill always comes due, that phone call you don't want to make. It becomes a relationship that quietly fades into regret. That dream you keep postponing. It becomes the ache in your chest when you see someone else living the life you never built. That truth you're not ready to face. It becomes the background noise in your mind, a low, constant hum reminding you that something is unfinished. We are not shaped by what we intend to do. We are shaped by what we actually face. Because what we face, we grow, and what we avoid, we grow around, like a tree bending unnaturally around a stone in its path. It keeps growing, yes, but not in the way it was meant to. So ask yourself, what are you bending around? What have you been telling yourself isn't that important, just to avoid the discomfort of doing it? The truth is, your life doesn't get better when you avoid your limits. It gets better when you break them. And that breaking often begins by facing what you've long refused to face. Avoidance always promises peace, but what it gives you is paralysis. It whispers later, not now, just a little longer, and while it may buy you relief in the short term, it sells your future at a discount. Because while you wait for the perfect moment, life doesn't wait for you. Your courage, your freedom, your becoming, they're all tied to the things you've labeled not yet. But what if the things you're most afraid to face are the things holding your strength hostage? What if every avoided truth is a part of yourself you've refused to meet? When you stop running, when you turn to face the thing, you take back your power. It might still be hard, it might still be messy, but it's yours again. You're no longer giving it your back. You're giving it your eyes. And that small shift changes everything. So today, not tomorrow, not someday, not after everything lines up, ask yourself, what have I been avoiding? And more importantly, what would my life look like if I finally faced it? Maybe the limit I keep running into is the one I refuse to walk through. Maybe the life I want is hiding on the other side of the thing I've been pretending not to see. Growth isn't always about adding something new. Sometimes it's about removing the limits you didn't even realize you were building, one avoidance at a time. You don't need to do everything today, but you need to stop turning away, because the things you avoid don't stay small. They grow until your life can no longer grow around them. We are meaning-making creatures. We don't just live life, we explain it to ourselves. We tell stories about who we are, why we're here, what's possible and what isn't. And often those stories become our shelter. They protect us from the unknown, from change, from risk, from truth. But they also trap us, because some stories aren't meant to last a lifetime. Some stories are meant to be outgrown. Excuses are just stories we've believed for too long. They begin with some pain, some fear, some uncertainty, a moment when we felt small or unready, or not enough. And instead of walking through it, we wrapped a story around it. This isn't who I am. I'm too old. I've never been good at that. It's just the way life is. At first these stories feel like protection, but over time they harden. They become walls, and those walls begin to define the shape of our life. But here's the quiet truth no one talks about. You don't have to keep believing a story just because you've believed it for years. You don't have to keep living by a rule you never consciously agreed to. The moment you tell yourself the truth, the real truth, the story begins to unravel. The excuse no longer holds its power, because truth has a way of breaking spells. Not loud truth, not angry truth, just quiet, honest truth. I've been afraid. I haven't given it my full effort. I'm still hurt from what happened years ago. I want more, but I don't know how to start. When you say it out loud, maybe for the first time, something shifts. You stop blaming the world and you start reclaiming yourself. See, an excuse is never really about circumstances. It's about what we're not ready to admit. It's easier to say I can't than to say I'm scared. It's easier to say they won't let me than I haven't tried. It's easier to say it's too late than I've waited too long. But there's something sacred about honesty, even if it's painful, even if it cracks you open, because in that moment of honesty you become real again. You stop performing, you stop explaining, you stop defending the limitations you didn't even ask for, and that's when growth begins. You can feel it, like fresh air after being inside too long, like light breaking through an old room you forgot you lived in. You realize, the only thing standing between me and who I want to become is a story I no longer need to tell. So tell a new one, not a perfect one, not a polished one, just a truer one. I'm not who I used to be. I don't know the next step, but I want to find it. I've carried this excuse long enough. Excuses are not flaws, they're signals. They show you where you still need healing, or clarity, or courage. And the moment you stop clinging to them, the moment you name them without judgment, they lose their grip. You don't need to fight your excuses. You just need to understand the fear beneath them, and love yourself enough to move anyway. So pause and ask yourself, what story have I been telling that no longer feels true? What excuse have I been repeating because it's easier than being honest? And what would happen if I stopped telling it? The truth may feel like a risk, but it's also the beginning of everything real. Your future is not built on the stories that keep you stuck. It's built on the truths that set you free. There's a quiet myth we've all been told, and many of us still believe. It says, you'll know it's time when you feel ready, when the nerves are gone, when the path is clear, when the fear disappears, when the voice inside finally says, now at last, everything is in place. But readiness is a feeling that rarely arrives, because it was never meant to be a requirement. We wait for readiness like it's a bus that will one day pull up to our door, but most of the time, it doesn't come. And while we wait for perfect certainty, life moves on without us. If we're not careful, not ready becomes a lifelong delay, a spiritual traffic jam where desire gets stuck behind doubt, and our calling turns into a question we never answer. But what if readiness isn't the green light we think it is? What if the real green light is honesty? Because the truth is, you don't need to feel ready. You just need to feel real. You need to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm scared, and I still want this. I don't have all the answers, but I can't keep waiting for them to arrive. I might fall, but I'm tired of standing still. That's not confidence. That's courage. And courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to be ruled by it. Think about how many things you've already done without feeling ready. Your first job, your first love, your first rush, your first risk, your first healing. Were you ready? No, but you were honest. You said, this matters more than my fear, and that was enough. Readiness is a luxury. Honesty is a choice. You may never feel fully prepared, but you can feel something deeper, a kind of inner truth that says, even if I don't know how, I know I can't stay here. It's not about having all the answers. It's about having the integrity to say, I'm not going to lie to myself anymore. We lie to ourselves in small ways every day. I'm just being patient. It's not the right time. I'll know when I'm ready. But what we're really saying is, I'm afraid. And that's okay. Fear isn't the enemy. Denial is, because denial keeps you still. Honesty gets you moving. Honesty opens the door to the life you keep dreaming of. And no, it doesn't erase the fear. It walks through it. It doesn't silence the inner doubt. It just refuses to let it dry. So pause here. Just for a moment, breathe, and ask yourself, what am I pretending not to want just because I don't feel ready? Where have I been waiting when I should have been walking? What would change if I stopped trying to be ready and started being real? Here's the truth. You may never feel fully ready, but if you wait for that moment, you might miss the one you're already in, because life doesn't begin at readiness. It begins at honesty, and from there, step by step, breath by breath, clarity finds you. You grow into the readiness by walking forward, not by waiting. So don't wait for the fear to leave. Don't wait for the perfect sign. Don't wait for the trembling to stop. Just begin, with truth in your chest and honesty in your hands. You don't have to feel ready to do something. You just have to stop pretending you don't want it. Freedom is a beautiful word. We chase it, sing about it, build lives around it, but most of us never stop to ask, what does real freedom feel like? Is it ease? Is it comfort? Is it the absence of difficulty? Or is it something far deeper, something earned, not gifted, chosen, not stumbled upon? Because if you look closely, you'll notice something strange. The people who seem the most free aren't the ones who avoid discomfort. They're the ones who walk straight into it. We've been taught to believe freedom lies on the other side of struggle, that if we work hard enough, wait long enough, fix ourselves enough, then we'll be free. But the truth is quieter and harder. The freedom you want is hiding in the very place you don't want to go. The difficult conversation, the vulnerable admission, the buried emotion, the dream you gave up on too soon. Discomfort is not a barrier to freedom, it's the doorway, and that's why we avoid it. Because freedom costs something. It costs the stories we've told ourselves for years. It costs the image we've carefully constructed. It costs the illusion of control, the idea that we can shape life without ever being shaped by it. But what if that discomfort you fear is not your enemy? What if it's your invitation? Discomfort says, look here, something wants to grow, something wants to be healed, something wants to be set free. But we label it as danger. We say, if it feels this hard it must be wrong, and in doing so we stay not because we're incapable, but because we're unwilling to feel what freedom actually asks of us. Because real freedom doesn't come from ease. It comes from walking into the fire and discovering you don't burn. It comes from choosing truth over safety, clarity over comfort, growth over the approval of others. Think about it. That thing you've been avoiding, the decision, the shift, the risk, is probably the very thing keeping you from your next level of life. Not because it's big or dramatic, but because it's true. We don't fear pain as much as we fear change. We don't fear failure as much as we fear seeing ourselves clearly. But freedom lives in that clarity, in that moment, when you stop negotiating with your fear, when you say, I won't stay small just because it's easy. When you realize the discomfort you've been dreading is a temporary toll to a permanent expansion. So ask yourself, quietly and courageously, what discomfort have I been avoiding? What truth have I been too scared to feel? What part of my life is begging to be walked into, not away from? The people who grow are not the ones who never feel fear. They're the ones who feel it and still move. They sweat, they stumble, they shake, but they cross the line. Because on the other side of discomfort is relief, reconnection, not just to your goals, but to yourself. You were not made to avoid discomfort. You were made to transform through it. And every time you do, your world gets bigger, your voice gets stronger, your freedom becomes real.